In your top story, election season is upon several African nations in the next few months. And with the season comes jostling for power. Zimbabweans will be queuing at the polls on the 30th of July in hotly contested elections since Robert Mugabe's ouster. Incumbent Emerson Mnangagwa and opposition leader Nelson Chamisa are considered front runners. Meanwhile, in Malawi, Joyce Banda has indicated her intention to run for high office for the second time. This as she returns from 4 years of self-imposed exile after serious corruption allegations. And in Nigeria, former Cross River State Governor Donald Duke is raising his hand for the highest office in the land. Duke promises to turn the country around from what he calls Muhammadu Buhari's failings. Meanwhile, what sticks out in most elections is allegations of vote rigging and smear campaigns that emerge as elections draw nearer. Now, this trend raises questions about the environment for free and fair elections. And now we are joined in studio by Dr. Kumba, Deputy Chairperson of the African Diaspora Forum. We also have in studio Mr. Nwora Okonkwo, a political analyst. A very warm welcome to you, gentlemen, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, you're welcome, and greetings to all your listeners, your viewers.
And now, Dr. Kumba, let me start with you.
Yeah.
Election season is upon several African nations, as we know this year, and it will be taking place in the next few months. Let's talk about the democratic development in Africa.
Wow. Talking about this, the question will be, do we have in place all the requirements that is internationally recognized to set proper presidential election in Africa? Unless some reforms are adopted and implemented on the ground, it's going to be difficult to say yes. And then also the fact that we recognize that some African states are actually encouraging for some voting right, but this is basically in theory. We need to also see an examination of what's happening on the ground. Practically, something paints another picture, right? So you will see that when it comes to the elections, the commission that is put in place, we discuss the biasness of their impartiality. And you will see that sometimes the presidency has a power to influence the setting of those electoral commission as well. So a lot of questioning is done around the way we address those issues with regards to the fairness, with regards to the legitimacy of those electoral commission as well.
I'm going to bring in Mr. Okonkwo, since he is a political analyst in this case. I just want to get your reactions in terms of the democratic development in Africa. What do you make of it?
Africa, over the years, has come to grips with the reality that it's a democratic entity. They might not have matured or have years of experience like the United States of America, that is seen as the perfect model of democracy because their democracy has stemmed for over 200 years. Most African entities are grappling with 30, 40, 50 years. But you can see that there is processes that are put in place for them to be democratic compliant. For instance, in most African countries now, coup d'etats is no longer the order of the day. Before, there used to be coups and counter-coups. But now, every process is through the ballot boxes. So Africa so far has put the processes in place to be democratically compliant. And that's why, for instance, during the elections, most African nations has international observers that come to verify, validate that the elections are free and fair. So within the context of coming to grips with democracy as an entity, most African nations have come and surpassed that reality.
But now we have seen Africa in the past experiencing different types of governance. What governance should we be seeing taking place that will not lead to war or people fleeing their own country?
It's a democratic setting that behoves on the tenets of the wishes of the people. For instance, the election that took place in DRC Congo wasn't forthright, and it pushed the current incumbent away. Now, you can see that the pressure has made him to say, okay, come end of this year, I'm relinquishing power. Therefore, if elections are conducted and every individual who is mandated or qualified to vote votes and is counted before everyone, is transparent, therefore, there won't be any need for there to be chaos or for people to be fleeing, like what is going on in some nations. So the basis needs to be addressed. If you take, for instance, the Republic of Southern Africa here, even in by-elections, you can see the transparency. For the first time, ANC lost to the metros, even in Johannesburg. You saw the transparency. The people voiced out their complaint. There was no need for bloodshed. But the people can always take a civil reaction to the things that are happening. Look at ESCOM. The staff are not happy. What did they do? They went on strike. So there are measures for citizens to embark on in a case where they are dissatisfied with service delivery or provision with the state of the nation.
Dr. Kumba, I also want to get yours on this one.
Right. I will say that on a certain level, it is correct. But in general, you will see that in African states, most of our political leaders, they don't seem to show their willingness to build a strong democracy in Africa. I mean, Africa has been independent for more than 60 to 70 years. But up to now, you can see that the behavior towards the way we address those issues with respect to elections are not properly done. The president has almost every power in Africa. He has the executive power. He controls the legislative power as well. So you are left with nothing. And this is why you will see that in most African states, the participation of voters is becoming very, very, very slow and very, very low. Simply because people don't have confidence anymore on the election in Africa. I mean, you will see the president, once he's getting old, it is his son who's going to replace him. We have witnesses of situations like that, which shows that there is a lack of transparency, there is no willingness to build a strong democracy, and mostly there is no vision, a true vision for Africa. We are losing, we don't have enough leaders, strong leaders who really think about their people, who really think about providing a true democracy in Africa. We are lacking on that. So this is my take.
Now, still on the voice of citizens during elections, has communication been working in favor of the citizens, looking at how most countries respond to the citizens' cries, especially during election campaigning?
No ways. People are dying, and there is no response to that. I mean, you will see a huge amount of observers coming, for instance, in a country. They will observe the process, but the point is to target the Election Management Commission and see exactly if they are appropriately set up for the job. Because, I mean, on my personal level, in 2009, there were an election in my country, in Gabon, where I was experiencing a situation where you vote, and then at the end of the day, you don't see where the, how do you call it again, the pooling of the result goes from there to the center. And then you don't know there is those delays as well when it comes to the outcome of the elections, which brings, again, a huge amount of frustration to people. And you will see as well that there is no resource that is allocated. For instance, national resources allocated for the opposition to actually lead a peaceful campaign. I mean, the media will be only kidnapped by the government, and they will not allow themselves to broadcast any information relative to the opposition parties. And situations like that are still existing on the ground. Yeah.
Mr. Okonkwo, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation. We've heard Dr. Kumbo saying that people are dying, therefore the government is not really listening to the people, especially when elections are taking place, when they are also campaigning. But when you look at most countries, it seems as if the elections generate violence most of the time when it comes to communication. How can we move away from such reports across the continent?
This is predominantly with every society, both Africa, both developed. If you look at what happened in the American election, he made a statement that sons or children succeed their parents. Let's look at it within the context of the Bush family. The father ruled, the son ruled. Does it mean the succession was not democratically inclined? No. I guess the example he's bringing to bear in this context of analysis would behove on the Keita family, when you look at that. And also maybe you can take it down to the DRC, that the son succeeded the stepfather. But that was a bloody coup that brought into power. And Uhuru Keita has been cleared that he actually contested the election fair and won squarely. Even when he was called to the International Court of Justice, he went there and came out victorious. Therefore, what quells violence from an election is still the forces that maintain civility in the nation. Because definitely, the essence of election is to listen to the voters' decision. And some people might not want or like the outcome of the election. Therefore, they can take to the streets to, show their dissatisfaction. So the best way to handle it is neither here nor there. The thing is that once the elections are conducted and the results are read, the mechanisms of maintaining law and order in the society should be on the lookout in every place if there is any uprising. In Germany, it happened. In Turkey, so it's global. So it behoves on the machinery you have in maintaining law and order to play and take its natural course.
Mr. Okonkwo, when we talk about journalists when it comes to communication as well, are we investigating and calling out people who are not doing their job? When you look at leaders, are we calling them out to say when it comes to corruption, they are doing corruption, therefore the people who are going to be voting should know about this, and so that we make it easier for them to know who they should actually vote and trust?
Before every election, every candidate is put up for the electorate to look at and make up a decision. And that's why the people of Malawi are saying, on what premise should Ms. Joyce Banda come and contest election? Now, if the electorate is not sanitized clearly on the reason why they should not vote her in, then people can vote in ignorance. Remember, so that's why there is what is called mass literacy education. And that's why people take it upon themselves to tour the whole, like South Africa, to tour the whole provinces and educate people on why they should vote for this candidate and why they should not vote for this candidate, based on what? Facts. For example, ANC found it extremely difficult to deal with corruption and issues of corruption under the former leader, and it cost them what? 4 metros. They lost Johannesburg, they lost Oshwani. So the people are sensitive to these issues. So the voters' confidence are restored in the new leader. So they feel, okay, ANC can do better in this regard. However, we want to see what is this person doing? How does the law attack this? And how does the law address this? And obviously, that's the best way to go. People should be put up to speed in terms of the knowledge, in terms of the capacity of every person who is running for every elective office, be it the presidency, the vice presidency, or whatever. People should have the right to know that this person is bad news or this person is good news for us.
Yes, Dr. Kumba?
Yes, I would like to just emphasize on the fact that this is basically in theory. On the ground, things are completely different. You know, you can educate the people, you can tell them whatsoever, but you see, the problem that we are facing here is that you cannot compare a banana republic with a proper developed economy, a proper developed country like America. You cannot compare it. The reality are completely different. The needs and the calls. So, I mean, you have those presidents who are only changing the constitution of their country just at a certain time because they are facing now the presidential election. So what kind of explanation you will get to that? But simply that it's either they want to control the country, but they don't want to talk about a true, real democracy in their country. And this is the problem. Now, today, for instance, if you take on the situation of Togo, the son of the previous president, Togo is actually in crisis. Due to what? Due to those elections. You take the situation of DRC, relative again to the situation of those elections. So if we don't address it properly, and we don't contextualize it as well, it is going to be a mere talk and based on theory only. But on the ground, we are dealing with people who are extremely frustrated. Some people are ready to die just for the sake of saving their country. So we're not joking about words here. It is true that our leaders, political leaders, don't have the right tools to really bring democracy in the continent. It is a fact.
And what solutions should we be looking at as the African continent?
The solution will be to try to always negotiate. But the problem is that when you are facing a dilemma where you can feel in your heart and in your blood that actually your leaders are not serving they're not serving your interest, but they're serving the interest of other people, then it's going to be a bit difficult. Because the interpretation, when you ask anyone in the street, any individual, a young African, do you really feel like your president is doing something for you as an individual? The response is clear. It's going to be no. But simply because we don't feel like they are there for our interest. They are there for the seat, and they will remain in the seat until they die. And if they don't die, they will try to make sure that somebody else will cover their own interest. Yeah.
So basically you're saying that the leaders are not actually looking into the issues that
definitely,
people are facing.
Definitely, the issue is into their favor. I mean, the situation of Africa being in a chaotic stand like that benefits those people. Yeah, because it's easy to control and to manage to make sure that they cover everything that they're doing on the side.
And after elections take place, it seems as if the issues, they never respond to those issues, because most of the time we see protests and marches and violence taking place. But when we look at the presidents and leaders that we appoint, what solutions can we really give to them? I've heard you saying that they don't have the tools.
Look, it is a bit difficult, but any African is always hoping that the African Union is a solution. But the problem is that the African Union, when we say it, it's a group of leaders that are under the control of those people. So it is a bit difficult. But we truly believe that if the African Union can stand and really try to create a better environment, a democratic environment, then something will come. Otherwise, we will still experience situations where wars are are happening and displacements of people going from their country to other country.
Mr. Okonkwo, what should the AU be discussing at this point when it comes to elections taking place on the African continent?
They should make sure that the elections are fair, free, and the choice of the people. The question is, how do they implement this? I don't succumb to the fact that we say that African leaders have failed us. No. If you look at the former president that left Liberia, she did a good job in Liberia. If you look at the former president of Ghana, Lawrence, he did a good job. And quite others that are exemplary. You see, Africa, if you cannot compare 30 years of democracy or 40 years of democracy to over 200 years of democracy. You understand? Even those that are in 200 years of democracy are still grappling with some issues that are technical. Therefore, what I look at from the AU should be, how can we implement that elections in Africa are seen to be fair and free? I respond to African Union. There was a coup in a nation by the military. The African Union sent troops to quell the coup and restore power to the president. That's good. So we need to find a way of implementation. AU is a very good setup to monitor and foster integration, commercial-wise, security, globally amongst them. But how do you implement this in nations who are members? When we get it right from the implementation, then Africa becomes a safe place for people to navigate, do business. And when they say, this is who we want, even if you vote an idiot into the office, that's the choice of the people. We can't rule it away. Remember, we are dealing with sovereignty. You have a limitation to your interference in our country. So those limitations are there. Therefore, they need to come up with a blueprint of agreement that, guys, if we send in observers and the observers say that this election is deemed not to be free and fair, that election will not stand. They should come up with a solution to that. And if they get it right, then the elections deemed to be conducted in African states will begin to be the voice of the people, will begin to be what people want are those that are in power.
Dr. Gumba, we mostly talk about failures on the African continent. Do we have success stories to tell after elections?
It's very, very rare to have success stories. I mean, yes, we have true leaders, but they are extremely few. The example of South Africa remains amongst the few, in terms of a proper democratic system where, when we go through an electoral process, the outcomes are not biased and they're not too much discussed. But in general, on the ground, we can see that it is extremely rare. Now, the situation as well comes to the fact that if there is a crisis, say in Congo, then Congolese move to South Africa. It's going to bring pressure to the South African government, isn't it? Then therefore, it is for the benefit and the sake of South Africans to call the government and say, okay, try maybe to collaborate with the Congolese government so that we can avoid the displacement of people and the killing of people. This is why the AU should play a bigger role, because all those situations relative to the presidential election affect somehow, somewhere, different countries as well.
What is your take on Western powers interfering on the African continent?
It is very big. It is very big. I will always emphasize the fact that there is a huge influence in terms of the exogenous powers. I mean, the Western plays a big role into, and you will see that most of the solution that we try to propose are coming from the Western, you know. Every time that we have a crisis, it's the European Union who will come and intervene. We don't really sit, we don't even start to trust each other in terms of solving our problems. This is why every time that we have a crisis, if it's not the US, it will be the European Union coming and trying to intervene. So I think it is time for our continent to mature up and to listen to each other and bring this notion of Ubuntu that we've been calling and talking every time.
Mr. Okonkwo, what's your take on this one?
Stability of African nations lies with Africa or African nations. Interference in terms of European powers and this is like a child and a mother. Remember, most of these countries were colonized by certain countries. Therefore, they still hold or have allegiance to them. For instance, the French colonies are still tied to them. If you look at the Congos, the DRCs, you know, they are still tied, Gabonese, to the French, you know, government. Therefore, to how you succeed from them is entirely up to the country's leadership structure. And that's why if we look at Nigeria, for instance, there was a time they came out and said no to the IMF loan. Rather, they brought up a policy. Okay, so the onus lies on the leaders. For instance, if you look at the GATT, it's called the General Agreement on Trade and Tariff, which controls every commercial undertaking between the Asian and the European economies. So no matter how much cars that the Japanese will produce in terms of the Toyota Lexus, that's the fuel economy, that is sound and these and cheaper, it must circulate a certain amount into other European nations to also accommodate other nations' products. Therefore, there is an understanding amongst these nations, and people abide by it. And that's why I respect the United Nations, even though they classify them as a toothless bulldog, to an extent right. But under Kofi Annan's leadership, he did something that was unique. When America wanted to go to Iraq, they said no. America definitely went. But when they came back to rebuild Iraq, the United Nations said no. We cannot support a process we did not initiate. You see, so it's the point of the leadership to say no. That is mandatory. But as long as the leadership will not put its foot down to say, okay, you can't come into this, you can't do that, then there's a problem. If you look at this consortium, which is just like a global consortium oil, Shell. Shell is in almost every country doing business. But some countries have kicked them out. Sorry, your cartel cannot work in our country. Take your things and what? Leave. So the onus of interference into what goes into your country lies primarily with the leadership. So it's what the leaders permit that happens.
Yes, Dr. Kumba.
Yes, I would like to emphasize something. Africa is the richest continent in the world. So the European Union, United States, China, Russia will never leave Africa. Nowadays, if you ask yourself, but what's happening in the continent? Let's talk about Boko Haram situation. Where are those gangsters getting all those super dangerous arms? And then you realize that actually there are people who are giving them all those munitions to destroy our country. Somehow we are thinking, but all those weird sickness that is suddenly coming like Ebola in Africa, where is it really coming from? And then you will realize that there is something that is extremely dodgy. We have the feeling that people are trying to reduce the number of population in Africa so that they can benefit from Africa. Africa is young, is full of potential. We have all the riches, and we have our people, our youth. So if those people are not secured enough by the AU, by trying to invest into military actions so that those different countries are protected, it's going to be really just a talk. Because right now, the predators are around the world to look at Africa and try to benefit from the natural resources of Africa. They will make sure that they will destroy our culture. They will make sure that we are lost in terms of our identity. And this is the problem that we are facing right now in the whole continent. And the leadership is not there to address those issues. So we are calling upon other leaders, cultural leaders, like singers, to always vehicle a message that stands for Africa, And I remember when I was a child in Gabon and I was into my 10 years, I knew everything that was happening in South Africa in terms of apartheid. I knew about Mandela. It was not through political leaders. It was through those cultures, through the singers, through all those Africans who were standing. And we need to call upon them to tell them that it is their responsibility to make sure that Africa will be saved. Not only from the political leadership.
I want us to talk about the environment in which elections have often been skewed in favor of the ruling party. We saw this taking place in Zimbabwe as well as Kenya.
Right. It is difficult to say because you see in Zimbabwe and Kenya, I will not say a lot because truly speaking, it is redundant to what we were saying. The opposition in Zimbabwe is mutilized by the fact that they don't really have a say towards what they want to put and implement. So it is really sad. I mean, I cannot really elaborate more on that.
Mr. Okongwa?
Yes.
I just wanted to find out, when we look at the environment of elections, usually it's often being skewed in favor of the ruling party, and we saw this taking place in Zimbabwe.
Yes, Zimbabwe is one way to look at it. I won't say the elections has been in favor of them because it's dominantly been one ruler ruling since independence. He just left some time ago, through the military pushing him out. So the new leader has not yet been tested. So all the apparatus they have up until now for over 30-something years is that of the structure aligning to one specific party. But if we look at the case of Nigeria, for instance, you will understand that the last incumbent didn't win the election. A new person came in. So it would not be right to use what is going on in Zim as a perfect analyst model for other countries. Okay, so what I'm basically saying here is, now, election is coming around the corner in Zim. Therefore, we have to look and see if they would maintain the same status quo because they are the leaders in government. It's obvious to pick that out. So I would not categorize and look at it from that angle. That's an ongoing, because they have never tested any other person except now. So you wouldn't be able to say, going forward, it's going to still happen. They might lose the election to MBDC. Anything can happen. So it's only when it's tested and we see a certain reoccurrence of the same pattern of dominance by the same party, by the same leader, then we can say it is a hopeless case, that this is not democracy. How can only one person be ruling a nation for over 38 years? No, it's wrong. So I wouldn't use that as a perfect analysis till it continues. So let's see what happens during the election, and then we will know whether it was fair, it was rigged or not.
Because I also know that Mnangagwa has already said that the elections will be credible, free, fair and transparent. But it seems as if Zimbabweans are not trusting the ZANU-PF party at this moment.
It's obvious for you to have that at the back of your mind, because if you've been under a particular rule for almost close to 40 years and the same leadership even though the other one has exited, is still coming from the same party. You would want to take it with a pinch of salt, meaning doubt. But when the election comes and we see that it's free and fair, then the nations and the city will are liking it to, okay, what this man is saying is what? The truth.
And what sticks out the most when it comes to elections is the allegations of vote rigging and smear campaigns that emerge as elections draw nearer, which is something that we have also been seeing from Zimbabwe. This trend raises questions about the environment for free and fair elections. We have heard citizens already calling the government out on this. What is the solution when it comes to that?
You can't stop smear campaigning. Even before the current president of Southern Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, was elected, there was a smear campaign against him with women he's keeping and using as sex slave. There are a lot of campaigns against most people, you know. So you can't stop what somebody is saying. However, you can investigate to find if there is truth in what the person is saying. And when you slander somebody's name, the onus lies on the individual to take reprieve from you within the boundaries of the law court. Okay, so we can't stop that. It's bound to be there. Somebody will say something, let's leave election. Even as an individual, even as we are on set, some people are busy saying certain things about you as an individual. But the most important thing is I would like to look at an individual from the point of your capability to deliver on what you promise the people, and then look at if you have what I call integrity or credibility as an individual. That's to be most profound. And how do I place on that credibility or profoundness or credibility on the individual? Should be on the track record which the person has over the years. Then I can allude to the fact, okay, this person can be trusted. For instance, the opposition is being led by Chamisa. You know, there's crisis in their camp already. They are not united. Because this person feels this is not supposed to be, this is not supposed to be that. So there are a lot of things to deal with when the elections are coming. I can bet you, before Cyril was elected as the leader of the ANC, I don't think he was sleeping. Because I had to deal with a lot of things every now and then. Even before the former president handed over, it wasn't easy. So you deal with a lot of things. So you can't control what people say, but you can control the quality of the genuineness of your intent and interest in the country.
Another individual, Mr. Okonkwo, that I want to talk about is Joyce Banda, as we know that she has indicated her intention to run for high office for the second time, and she returns from 4 years of self-imposed exile after serious corruption allegations against her. Now, those who have been implicated in corruption seem to be moving the country backwards when they come in and say they want to actually come in for the elections as well.
Remember, being an accused is different from being found guilty. We had a discussion in this place where they are saying they need to extradite Grace Mugabe to come here and answer questions. And they have already passed a guilty sentence on her. And I said, you can bring her here and the court will come to a different conclusion. She is alleged to be corrupt. Not that she has been proved to be corrupt. They are two different things. So if they are saying that she was corrupt during her leadership, how come she has not been tried? How come she was not found guilty? So those are things I look at. So the future of Malawians lies with the Malawians. So if the lady during her rulership over them has been corrupt, then, and proven, there's no way the populace, even no matter what money she brings, they'll vote her in. So the voice of the people is clear. For over the years, since 1994, ANC has been ruling. Never, ever have they lost an election the way they did. Because of what? the citizens felt that this leadership is misleading them and does not fall within the declaration of what African National Congress stands for. Therefore, they voted them out of power. In this one, here, Shwan is. You understand? So, the voice of the people should be able to stand and rise above the predicament of whether she's guilty or not. Let me give you a clear example. Even if you bring Mugabe to stand for election with this current, I can bet you with my eyes closed, not open, that he will lose. That's how it is. So the verdict of the people cannot be subverted if there is truth in that.
And looking at Joyce Banda coming in for elections, what do you think the people will say?
I think definitely they will not vote her in. Yes, they rather let others, new brand to come in. If you look at what happened in Liberia, the current president defeated the former vice president. It was because the people felt the current president has more to offer than the VP. There's no case of election rigging. It's just the voice of the people. And so far, you can see the man has stood out to be doing something that is worthy to be emulated in Southern Africa. Yes.
I want us to move to Nigeria, where the former Cross River State Governor Donald Duke is also raising his hand for the highest office in the land. And he also has promised to turn the country around from what he calls Muhammadu Buhari's failings. What do you make of this? Do you think he will be able to do so?
It's just like where a man is asking a woman out. You tell him that there is no need for you to be with that man because you can do better than that man. They say the taste of the pudding is where? In the eating. He's campaigning. He's saying that the shortcomings of the current president, he will address it. He is yet to. Being a governor is totally different from being the number one man of a nation. A governor has a certain geographical area you exercise control. However, in a state like a country of Nigeria, centering and seeing over millions of people, it is not easy to exercise leadership. Therefore, my first question would be, what is his manifesto like? Can we checkmate his manifesto to his 8 years of rulership in Cross River? Does he have the integrity? Was he found in any scandalous affair? Those are things we have to look at before we listen, if you look at the current incumbent in Nigeria, he has not been indicted in any form of corruption. Any form of corruption. In fact, he comes across board. So what we are looking at, we have to look at the individual, match what he's saying to his character. And then let's see, because other people are still going to voice out their intention before 2019.
Dr. Kumar, let me get your last comments on this one.
Just to say that in terms of Mrs. Bemba coming back, I think she will have to just scrutinize and see and test the temperature. Because I truly believe that somebody will not make a return for the seat of running the presidency without testing the water first. And I truly believe that maybe there is a call that was made to her so that she can come and revamp what was not done during absence. So everybody is free to come and present themselves as a candidate. They have this right. In terms of Jean-Pierre Bemba, for instance, who has been, we will say, released by the ICC, in terms of the allegation that was done to him. I think this is where we need to also point out that sometimes we have the tendency of marginalizing in Africa our opposition party and our opposition leaders because we want to get rid of them. If we can't get rid of them directly, we will use some smartly evil method to make sure that they are out of the game and there will not be a disturbance in terms of trying to maintain the power that the other people are trying to do. So this is my last, but it is really a very ugly picture to realize that up to now, Africa is facing challenges just when it comes to elections, which is something that we should have been able to run from a long time ago. And then those are the ones that are affecting actually the continent, because now moving from another election, other people will be affected, and then it will create another chaos. And then the people who are usually responsible for that, they will not be accountable. And this is the pity that we realize in the continent.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming in studio today.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And that was Dr. Kumba, Deputy Chairperson of the African Diaspora Forum. We also had Mr. Nwora Okonkwo, political analyst, just giving us some more details, as we know that the election season is upon several African nations in the next few months. And with the season comes the jostling for power, as we know that Zimbabweans will be queuing at the polls on the 30th of July in hotly contested election since Robert Mugabe's ouster, and incumbent Emmerson Mnangagwa and opposition leader Nelson Chamisa are considered the front runners. And we also know that in Malawi, Joyce Banda has indicated her intention to run for high office for the second time, and this as she returns from 4 years of self-imposed exile after serious corruption allegations against her. We also had Nigeria, where former Cross River State Governor Donald Duke is raising his hand for the highest office in the land, and Duke promises to turn the country around from what he calls Muhammadu Buhari's failings.